meeting to order, the audit team committee, October the 13th. We have an agenda. We don't have it on there. I don't guess we have any minutes from the last meeting. No. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the status of the transition to the hybrid audit model. And Ms. Stack, you have some handouts. There's Dr. Turner got them. Hello, Mr. Fanny. Is that hello?
We're gone to a smaller room.
You need me to sit down? Yeah.
No, I don't need you to sit down. 1, 2, 3. Okay, our policy that we passed, I guess on September the 9th, we adopted, said the internal auditing department will be under the supervision of the superintendent and conduct audits of school activity funds, extended day programs, warehouse activities, student classification, and other routine audits of the district financial practices. Dr. Royster, are we in the process of doing that now?
Yes, sir. You have, I believe now, all of you in front of you a schedule for how we propose to conduct the internal audits for the year. Now we have a couple of challenges with this related to personnel staffing, but we have talked with Mr. Finney about supplementing our staff with some of his personnel as they move out of their busier time of the year. We also are in the process for advertising and have made a first run at narrowing the list of applicants for the person to manage internal auditing, and they will also conduct internal audits. Without going into great detail, since we're in open session, we have one employee in internal auditing. Currently, we have 2 full-time employees over there. We have one that has just returned on a limited or full basis, Robin, from sick leave. Returned on a full basis. We have one on intermittent family medical leave. So we have a little bit of a challenge there, but we're working through that, and hopefully we'll soon have we'll have soon completed our process of selecting an internal audit coordinator, director, who again will be a working supervisor, not just simply supervise audits. And we have worked with Mr. Finney to supplement that group with the personnel we need to have to begin the audits that we normally would do, as well as the ones that we've identified that we think provide some level of risk that we believe we can mitigate by performing some audits that were not being performed.
Okay. Have you decided on where the internal auditing department is going to be housed? Nope.
I'm sorry, somebody talking out there, and I was hearing him and hearing you at the same time. I believe we're going to end up housing that department at MT Anderson. One of the issues that we talked about, and actually Mr. Finney gave us some good insight into this. It came out of his recommendations that while there is, certainly a desire not to build relationships to the point where auditors lose their objectivity, I think he identified in his assessment of the current internal audit setup that the fact that group was remote really off completely by themselves somewhere, did not foster the kind of relationship that allowed them to be viewed as someone providing a needed service and a beneficial service. It kind of more established them as, that's not somebody you want over around in your business. And while we want them to be objective, we want them to follow the standards that are set for internal auditing, we also want departments and units within the district to understand that they're not there just trying to catch you doing something wrong. They're there for the protection of our employees. They're there for the protection of our processes and to assure that we're doing things in an effective and efficient manner, particularly as it relates to assets and the management of cash. Because the proper managing of assets and the handling of cash indirectly and directly benefits all of our employees.
And they will have their own secure location.
Yes, sir. As soon as we figure out how to subdivide it and work around the HVAC system without incurring tremendous cost.
Okay, and the person in charge, whatever you're going to call that person, reports directly to Dr. Turner?
Be reporting to Dr. Turner. I believe we settled on Director of Internal Audit. I think that was we went back and forth on several titles and settled on that one.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Lewis? Been more severe. No questions.
Mr. Meek, if I might, before we move off of you had asked about the title. I mentioned we're in the process search. On our final round, we will also have two CPAs with us. One, Mike Bolick, that you all may know. He's the president of the foundation, but he's a CPA with Elliot Davis, I think. Is that right, Larry? And we also have the internal audit executive or the chief internal auditor from Gwinnett County Schools, and they will be participating. We had actually asked Mr. Finney to participate, but I believe he has I won't say a horse in the race, but I believe he may have an employee in the consideration group. So he's declined to participate for that reason.
And on the final selection?
The final selection would ultimately come to Dr. Turner and I, but this would be the committee that gives us here's who we think's best. And I will sit with them.
When do you predicting that'll happen?
I would imagine it can happen by the end of October on the timeline we're on right now. Does that seem reasonable? Scott, Robin, y'all a little closer to that process than I am. I think that's possible.
Okay. Are you going to hire besides the director and the two internal auditors that we have presently? Are you going to hire somebody else, or is that going to be it?
We have that one frozen position. What we really want to do is have that person come in, let them get accustomed and acclimated to being here, and kind of talk with them about, is that a position we need to have, or do we need to sub out some to work through Green Finney? In other words, kind of let that individual have a say in it, since they're going to be the ones ultimately held responsible for running that area. I think that would be better than us making a decision before we have that person in place.
You recall, or Robin recall, what our budget was for the internal auditing department prior to this?
I don't recall right offhand. We can certainly get that to you all.
Or what, close to $500,000? It was close to that. Seems to me like that was the number.
I remember it was in that ballpark.
Okay.
We're well within that. The posted salary for the person to be the director is slightly lower than Mr. Barber's, because different role, different title. But it is competitive with that of people with similar responsibilities within the system. And then we have the position that is not yet, that is frozen. So okay. we have some funds there beyond the pay for that individual.
Are you still comfortable with this hybrid model?
As comfortable as we can be with something we hadn't really seen the first result from. But yes, sir. I think so.
Well, the list on table 1 and table 2 here, was this the same list that you'd given me, Robin, before?
we cleaned up some of the language to make it more easily understood. For example, in frequency, I don't think we had written that in the most clearly understood way. So it now reads, for example, fans cash handling in table 2, 1/3 of the locations each year. Before, I don't remember now how it was written before, but it wasn't that clear that we'd go do 1/3 of the location. So every 3 years we'd get to your location.
Okay. And that will be kept a little to yourself, I guess. They won't know you're coming, or will they have to prepare for you?
Well, and I think what we will have to do to ensure that continues to be the case is that we may have to throw some in there. You might get there might be 1 or 2 in there that didn't go quite 3 years.
Okay.
So as you wouldn't be able to predict. Well, I can slide here for 2 years. My turn's not till the 3rd year. So we'd publish the schedule at the time that it's implemented.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about the audits that they're compiling to do, planning on doing?
Did we talk about one audit that we might be interested in looking at? Didn't we talk about one?
Yesterday. A little bit. We haven't talked about it here yet, and we'll wait till the other business to talk about that if you
Okay,
don't mind.
that's fine. That's fine. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Lewis.
Just a question for Mr. Finney, if I can. I think this is a great list. This is the first year that we've kind of gone without kind of this separate voice kind of looking at this list. I mean, just as an outsider, is there anything, knowing what you know about our district, that isn't on this list that maybe we should be also looking at?
I think I actually had a couple suggestions when we met earlier to add to the list. So I think it looks good at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, also in the
Wait a minute,
policy.
Roger.
Okay,
As well.
that's what else. I didn't see you. Sorry.
Yeah, so the audits that we have listed, the one conversation we had was, we were talking about there are a lot of things that are routine, and it is something that you guys conduct in-house. Where do we get on reporting of that? If they're internal, if they're audits that you're going to conduct kind of under your department structure, will those still be, how are we going to report those to the board, or will they be reported to the board?
We'll report the results to the board. We want to work with the newly appointed, when we get that person, the newly appointed director of auditing as to what's the best format for that reporting. And then we'd probably ask this committee to offer some suggestion or insight into what that might look like as well.
Follow up. Is there anything on this list that you felt like would be better performed by an outside auditing firm, either on some less regular basis, or totally, maybe this is best to be done by an internal auditing department based on your best practice?
Yeah, I think what we had talked about is waiting until the director comes in. And once the director's kind of had an opportunity to kind of get settled in a little bit, to get into a little more detail on that. Because some of it, Ms. Wells, is going to depend upon, does the internal audit group have the right expertise to do some of these things, or would it really be more efficient to get somebody from the outside? So some of that's going to depend upon who the director is.
One thing you missed, because I don't think you were in the room when we talked about it, because of we're short some staff over there for a couple of reasons. One being intermittent medical leave. We will be looking to Mr. Finney for some contract support for some of these already.
But I guess once you get somebody on board, what I'm trying to get to is there anything that we put on this list originally? Because we kind of created this list out of our committee work. So is there anything on here that we kind of thought, okay, these are just standard things that should be handled internally? Is there anything that, looking at it now, someone might say, gosh, that's really better, standalone external audit that should be conducted?
I mean, even those that are ones that we've not done before, they should be ones, I think, in general, a competent auditor would be able to perform without any particular expertise. Would you agree with that, Larry? I mean, even the maintenance interval thing, you just read what the interval is, and then you look at our documentation. Did you perform that function at that point in time? Which is probably, those at the bottom, that's really probably the non-financial one that has, on its surface, might appear to be somewhat technical in nature.
And then, I think a perfect example of what you guys have done is when something needed to be done on the IT side of things in terms of the security assessment, internal audit didn't have the expertise for that. Excuse me. So you did go outside. I think that's a good example.
Thank you. Mr. Finney, since you're talking, our new policy says that you will provide a updated report on audits that you've completed to us monthly. Are you in preparation doing it? I'm not asking for one now, but I'm just wondering if you are aware of that, and how do you plan on doing that?
Yeah, I think that's something that, since this is all new, that we'll work through. But we're prepared as you all meet, and we're somewhere in the process of performing our audit. We'll be glad to come and present kind of the status of the audit, and we can work on a format. I was just going to present some things verbally today, but would be glad to come up with some kind of written report format if you want, that would be helpful.
Verbally today?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Would you be so kind as?
Oh, just give you an update on the external audit. Sure. So we're in just to step back and kind of remind you. So we come in for about 2 weeks, sometime in the spring, and perform what we call kind of our interim work and our planning. And when I say come in, obviously a lot of it this go around's been done remotely, but so we did that back in the spring, and then we are in our third and final week of our final field work, kind of wrapping up just kind of the day-to-day work that needs to be done as far as the audit. We have begun the process of drafting the financial statements. So I'm thinking by the end of this week that most of our field work will be done, such that we will begin drafting our report. And I would probably anticipate an initial draft for us to give to Robin and her team probably by the end of next week. And then I don't even know if we've actually talked about dates yet, but we normally will come to the November Cal meeting for our presentation, and we're planning on doing that as we normally have. There's a couple things I wanted to mention to you that are kind of unique either this year or next year. One is, and I know you've heard about the CARES Act and the money that the district's received and has spent. The district has received and spent enough funds that it is considered a program that's going to have to be audited under the Federal Single Audit Act. The challenge that we have on that is that the federal government still has not provided us with what they want us to do, what they want us to look at. Typically, when there's a federal program they want us to look at, they kind of lay out the general procedures. Because this is so new, we still have not received anything from them saying this is what we want you to do. So that's the one thing that could delay us, depending on what the timing of that ends up being. And then the other thing, and we talked about this last year when I did the audit presentation, but I know it was a year ago. So the AICPA, which is our oversight organization, and the Office of Management and Budget, which is the federal arm that kind of oversees the federal audits, they have instituted some new requirements this year regarding independence. And it hadn't been really very popular with anybody, but they didn't ask any of us. And in essence, what they've said is that if as the audit firm, you also prepare the financial statements. They do not consider that us preparing the financial statements as being independent. And so in essence, what has to happen is there has to be another party outside of our direct audit team that has to review the financial statements and also some of the work that we do to satisfy the Office of Management and Budget regarding our independence. So by far and away, we talk through with Robin and Trace kind of the options that were available. And by far and away, it's going to be an additional cost, but by far and away, the least expensive cost was we have actually taken an employee of ours and have put him off in his own as a separate department. So he's not involved in any of the audits, and he is becoming that third party that can do that work, so that we don't have to get a whole nother CPA firm involved that would be much more time consuming and costly if we went that route. So those are the two new things this year that have happened. And next year, there is one new governmental accounting standard that was supposed to be implemented this year, but it got delayed. And it is regarding what's called fiduciary activities. And the impact on the school district is you've got all of your student activity funds, all your pupil activities. Those are considered agency funds of the district. This new standard does not allow us to consider them agency funds anymore. They have to be considered what are special revenue funds. So we had to go to the State Department of Education and ask the State Department of Education, would they please issue some guidance on how they want all of that reported. And the good news is that it doesn't change what the school district has to do day to day with all of this. It's just a change in how we have to report it with the year-end financial statements. So that'll be something new for next year. And then there's one other standard that's out there regarding leases, but I don't think it's really going to have a significant impact on the district. So that's kind of what's out there that's new. So again, the only thing that really concerns me from a timing standpoint right now is waiting for the federal government to say, here's what we want you to do with the CARES Act money that's been spent. So
You won't have to address that until next year.
no, that's this year.
This year.
It is this year.
So in June 30. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we're otherwise, I think we're in good shape and on target, just where we would expect to be.
Questions for Mr. Finney? Let me ask you one. You said the AICPA, is that right?
Yes.
Brought the rule that you got to have an out or another person to look over the financial statements. And you think they are agreeable to let a person set aside in your organization do that?
Yes, we have. That's been vetted all the way up through the federal government and the AICPA. And as long as that person's not involved in any way in any of our audits that we're doing, then he's considered independent.
Okay.
Mr. Meek, might I offer a suggestion or a comment?
Sir?
We don't as yet know the extent of the audit that would be required for the CARES Act money. That fair statement?
Right.
That strikes me as something that we might ask this group to engage them to do, depending on the depth that's required of the audit they must do. We may want to ask you all to have them look at our entire claiming under the CARES Act. I believe we're at a little over 17 million total, Robin, 17.4, something like that. And obviously, if we were to misclaim, it would likely take some period of time for the government to figure out that we've misclaimed, and they could show up here perhaps at an inopportune time economically and want some amount of their money back. And so depending on the scope of the audit that's required, we may want to ask you all to engage the external firm in a more in-depth audit of how we file for CARES Act. Not that we believe that we've done it in any way that's wrong or improper, not saying that, but as an insurance policy to ensure we have done it in a way that's correct and proper to avoid any liability that might be a year, 2 years, or 3 years out. I think the last time we did a FEMA claim of any significance, it was almost 2 years before we even got the money. So those things sometimes trail by several years, the accountability for them. We want to make sure we did it the right way and didn't claim anything inappropriately. Or if there's an opportunity to claim something appropriately to replace something that might not have been appropriate, we might take advantage of that by making use of the audit of the claiming process.
Questions? Lisa?
So I heard you say it was an independent, a single audit, I think was the word you used.
Yes, that's what it's called.
So it doesn't have to be, it's not a single audit, then you have to roll in to your CAFR report, or it.
Right. So
Yeah.
the way it works is you all have 3 programs that typically fall under the single audit, and we rotate testing. It's IDEA, USDA, and Title I. And there's a threshold on the amount of dollars you spend that determines whether a program is big enough to qualify under the single audit for us to look at it. And the 7.8 million that you spent as of June 30th was over that threshold. So that's why it has to be looked at.
Right, so I guess, Dr. Worcester, what are you asking us to do beyond what he has to do as part of the CAFR this year?
Nothing right now, because we don't know the extent of the requirement of the audit for the CARES
So
Act.
if the requirements are skinny, then you're saying you might want some additional work so that we can be sure.
And I think we'd want that performed externally, particularly since they would already be doing work related to that. And I think that amount of money might be one that would better come from through the audit committee as perhaps an audit for the board.
If I understand our policy correct, we would have to take it to the board even if we recommended it to be approved. We couldn't approve an audit. To go out to do an audit, we'd have to get approval from the whole board.
Well,
Go ahead.
so it seems to me that they have to do the audit as part of the CAFR requirement, period. So the question would be, if they're going to add to the scope because of a concern about a best practice, I don't really know that would be, because you'd be taking it to the board to just say, we want to add an item to this audit, or we're going to add 2 items to this audit. So I don't really know that I would think that would be necessary.
Royster, you were asking.
Well, and I think it's just to put the idea on the table, because we don't yet know enough about the audit they'll be required to perform to see what gaps, if any, there might be.
Yeah, just from my experience, typically if you're just going to change the scope a little bit, that doesn't rise to the level of having to go to the full board, just in dealing with some other districts. But obviously that's for you all to decide.
What about where the superintendent's authorized by notifying the board of
And we could certainly handle it that way if you all prefer to do that. But if it's, it looked like it's an opportune place to benefit the district and perhaps utilize the other side of the hybrid model just to see how that works. I mean, for nothing else. But I think there would be benefit to us if that audit is not as detailed as we might want it to be.
that would be time sensitive. So I think you would be covered under policy to do that without
doing that.
approval. Everybody agree? Okay. Okay.
To go back to your earlier question, Robin sent me this just a minute ago. The total budget for internal auditing is $472,421. Salary fringe, and there's a small amount of purchase services, supplies, and equipment.
For internal.
Internal, yes.
That's what Rick's department did. That's what we paid or budgeted for. Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay. Yesterday, some members of the board talked about maybe doing I'm not quite sure what to call it, an audit, but a review of the HR department. And y'all want to follow up on that, or what are you thinking?
I only asked to just be put here so that maybe we could talk about it, because I feel like before we bring to the board some sort of proposal, it just seemed like it would be an appropriate place for this group to maybe look at it, even though it's not a financial audit. The impression I got yesterday was that it might be useful for us to have an outside group kind of look at the department and make some recommendations.
Dr. Royster, you want to comment?
Yeah, I think I've had some little more than 24 hours to consider this, and I have given it some amount of thought in that period of time. And what immediately occurred to me, one, this is something you all talked to me about doing as part of my evaluation, so I believe I certainly need to follow through on that. It seems to me that an approach that I would take to do this might be some combination of what we used in the old CPO. Some of you will remember that the corporate, what was the P for us? You remember the operational excellence were the last two words. Corporate process for operational or something. But anyway, we utilized people of expertise in our own community. It occurred to me that if I want to look at HR processes, to use some combination of CPO along with, I mentioned to you earlier that we're using the internal auditor, chief audit executive from Gwinnett County as a part of the interview process for this internal audit position. Perhaps get some HR people from other school districts and put together an external review of our processes and procedures by both people that are professionals in HR in general and also are professionals in HR related to school districts, which is, there's some aspects of HR that are the same no matter what your industry is. There are others that are unique to school districts. And so I had given that some degree of thought, but obviously not enough to, put forward a plan today.
Comments, Lisa?
Well, I guess since we have Mr. Finney here, one of the things we talked about in our committee work when we're trying to restructure was the fact that you have an opportunity in auditing to audit processes as well as just finances. And so this would be a place where the discussion was, is there an audit that we can conduct that would, you would understand processes and best practices and that kind of alignment. Have you seen something like that done where you work with like an HR department to look at processes and benchmarks and procedures and that kind of thing, and then present some sort of report and findings?
Yes, we have, and typically with those kind of scenarios, it does kind of go along with what Dr. Royster was saying. Was a lot of times you will pull together a team from different groups where maybe you've got some people that are used to doing auditing, but you're going to pull together some HR experts, whether they're with other districts or entities, or I've even been involved with one where we grabbed a couple people that were part of kind of staffing and recruiting that were, kind of their niche was the HR area. So there's different ways that you can do it, but yes, it's not that unusual to do that.
So it's kind of like an accreditation process.
A little bit, it can be.
Yeah,
Their team would go in, yeah.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I know we kind of put this on the administration yesterday, so I didn't think that today we would take an action. So I'd be comfortable. We want to wait and have the administration bring us back a suggestion. I just think this might be the most appropriate place to have that discussion.
I do like the aspect of bringing in a different team to look at other things such as recruiting and all of that stuff. And I think that's important, not just going with some districts that have HR, but bringing in other ideas. You know what I'm saying? I like that.
Well, I think what would be important for you all is just to make sure that you like the scope, because once you determine the scope of what you're thinking, then, you know, the right team can be pulled together.
Dr. Royster, you want to think about it some more and bring us back? Or do you want to?
Yes, right. You know what Mr. Finney has suggested, I think parallels where I had started with this, and that is looking at the corporate community and looking at the school district community to bring people in that are expert in HR. I do pretty strongly feel like the administration was charged with doing that as part of my evaluation. I think the administration needs to do that. Certainly think Mr. Finney would be well capable of coordinating something like that. But I'll certainly give thought to that and come back to you.
Okay.
I also like that.
Here we go.
Here. I also like that because what it says is that you will be evaluated by a group of your peers who you respect in that industry. And so it's not as I would think you would see it as an improvement of your craft as opposed to somebody outside of that industry trying to tell you what to do and they have no idea what you're dealing with. So I do like that idea.
Oh, I would certainly agree with that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think I agree with it also. And I think the P was professionals. I can't remember for sure, but it seemed like it was corporate professionals.
Professionals for operational excellence. I just remember the CPO, and I remember 3 of the 4, but I guess 75% from something that's, 14 years old is not too bad.
75%.
Thanks.
Okay. Since we may not have another meeting unless we call one or for a couple of months, do we want him to bring that to the committee of the whole or idea?
I would prefer what he wants.
I wait for Bert to.
Well, I mean, if we would have to take it, if he comes up with it, we would have to take it forward. What do you think, Dr. Rusty?
Or we handle it, as you suggested, the other one, that we simply engage Mr. Finney, and then you all get a copy of the report. That we do that with him. And I would share that with the whole board. Here's the process we're going to use. He's going to contract with us, part of their contract, to carry out the process. Because that's in essence what you all asked me to do yesterday.
You agree? Okay. I think you have the okay from us. So I think bring it back
To start.
Bring it back to the committee. We get figured it out.
And I think that could.
It's just the 5 of us.
I think that could probably just come as information because it's simply how we're following through on that.
I think so. We have any other questions?
Well, I guess, when do we meet again as a committee?
Well, we're supposed to meet 3 times a year, so 3 times, so at least 3 times. We can meet every day, but.
Well, I guess maybe we don't necessarily have to meet again if, knowing that you guys are coming in November with a report, I guess I would just ask at that time, Mr. Finney, understanding our structure of how we've kind of realigned, we had a few conversations with you about what else did you think we might audit that we haven't looked at in the past, and you have a pretty good historical record of what's been audited and what processes and places we looked at. So kind of understanding that the board's desire is to kind of get beyond just check the boxes and standard audits and really digging into looking at operational processes and practices.
Right.
Perhaps you could recommend to us, if I won't put you on the spot and ask if you have anything right now, but in preparation of that CAFR and then looking at all those pieces, maybe after November, you might have some suggestions for us to look at, consider operational practices we might audit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Be glad to.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Great.
Good job, Roger. Could you start doing the board meetings?
Without objection, we will adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you all.